last week on Legally Kidnapped.
Good evening. Our top story this week, the Los Angeles County child protective industry is taking heat over an increase in child deaths under its watchful eye, with the system sucks blaming the agency's attempts to reduce foster care numbers as the cause. Two county supervisors, however, are criticizing the report, which was leaked to the LA Times, claiming that the newspaper is misrepresenting the numbers. A group who has helped to lead the search for a missing foster child named Husseini Campbell has given up the search and wants to start a summer camp for kids. In Arizona this week, brothers and sisters who have been separated for long periods of time in the foster care system get to spend a whole afternoon together at a park. The state of Nebraska plans to privatize its foster care system, and the Nebraska Foster Care Review Board bashes the state for its reform efforts. A group of state legislatures from across the country are working on legislation that would put a stop to the growing number of anchor babies in the U.S., and the state of Arkansas cries about a shortage of foster homes. The big pharmaceutical companies want to label toddlers as depressed so that they can drug them, and the state of Washington tries to cut Medicaid costs by cutting back on the psychotropic drugging of poor children. A new study reveals that gay parents are more likely to have gay kids, and gay kids are being bullied in the Florida foster care system. The number of homeless, aged-out foster youth in the state of Washington is a growing problem. A study from the University of Colorado suggests that children who have had fathers that have been in prison are at a higher risk of drug abuse. And another report blames the U.S. prison system for having inadequate policies for dealing with prisoners who are pregnant, giving birth, or already mothers. Child protection policies are going to be discussed in Fiji this week. The head of Amnesty International says that legal failings that allow institutional child abuse in Ireland need to be addressed. And the Pope orders a probe into child protection procedures in the Irish Catholic Church. In Israel, the ombudsman blasts a family court judge for not allowing a gay father's twins from a surrogate mother in India into the country. In South Korea, an adoptive mother gets busted for killing her adopted daughters for the life insurance money. An 8-month pregnant woman from China is beaten and dragged to the hospital kicking and screaming and forced to undergo an abortion for violating China's one-child policy. And a child social worker from New Zealand gets 6 years for sexual abuse. The child protective industry in Australia goes to the crapper this week as a new report into the state of child protection in the Northern Territories is released. The government allocates $164 million to ease a backlog of cases and recruit more workers from other countries. This after a quarter of recruits from the UK have chosen to break their contracts rather than work for such an overburdened and poorly managed system, and calls for the government to be stripped of its child protection powers. An Australian grandmother accuses the child protective industry in Victoria of failing to protect her grandchildren from a pedophile, and a former ombudsman from Victoria is calling for the sterilization of parents who the child protective industry claims is abusive. In England this week, a U.S. charity pays a British drug addict £200 to get a vasectomy. Torbay's Child Protective Services is found inadequate according to an Ofsted report. In Canada this week, parents hold a protest in front of the Children's Aid Society in Northumberland, Ontario. A 22-year-old candidate for city council and his mother are reunited in another Facebook success story after CAS took him away 10 years ago. And a dying mother puts out one last desperate plea to find her long-lost daughter who was taken into adoption back in 1948. In entertainment news this week, Jodie Foster is getting sued by the 17-year-old who she beat for taking her picture, and her good friend Mel wants his 11-month-old daughter to pay rent. Porn star Janine Lindemulder takes Jesse James back to court again over a custody matter involving their daughter Sunny James. And rock star Rod Stewart reunites with his daughter who has been put up for adoption back in the 1960s. The parents of a child who died in a foster home in Oklahoma is suing the child protective industry and the foster parents who killed her. And a judge in Las Vegas shows his displeasure with a persistent child advocacy group from California who is trying to sue Clark County in the state of Nevada for harming the foster children in its care. In this week's Foster Crimes Report, the former executive director of a California casa puppet agency pleads no contest to a charge of embezzling $46,000. A former Fresno County foster parent, youth minister, and convicted sex offender is given a license to run a daycare. In Las Vegas, a 9-year-old boy is made to testify about the abuse he suffered while in a foster home. A social worker from Ohio is accused of breaking a man's jaw. A Texas foster care agency fails to protect foster kids from sexual abuse while living in a group home. And a caseworker from Indiana is arrested for sharing confidential documents and photos of a child abuse case. A mean old cop from Toronto by the name of Officer Bubbles sues YouTube commenters after making cartoons and teasing him about being an asshole for
If the bubble touches me, I'm going to be arrested for assault. Do you understand me? Bubbles. Yes, that's right. It's a deliberate act on your behalf. I'm going to arrest you. Do you understand me?
A Texas cheerleader is kicked off the squad for refusing to cheer for the boy who she says raped her. And a father from Chicago, Illinois is cleared of charges for taking his daughter to church. In Georgia, a woman was arrested because her 14-month-old toddler was making too much noise in the library. In Florida, a sheriff's deputy is suspended for failure to report child abuse. And 13 special needs child deaths over the last 10 years have been attributed to poor care at a Chicago area nursing home. A father from Nebraska protests the unwarranted snatching of his 14-year-old daughter. And finally tonight, in North Carolina, an 11-year-old boy takes his parents' marijuana to school and rats them out after a DARE anti-drug event. For these stories and all the latest dirt on the child protective industry, visit www.legallykidnapped.com. And until next week, this is Baby LK, over and out.